The word refuge brings to my mind two words: Shraddha, steadfast faith, and Saburi, limitless patience. Perhaps the situation we are in today was already known to the Trikala Jnana Swarupa, Sri Satya Sai. In preparation for this, Swami, in his infinite love and mercy, already wrote a letter on how we must conduct ourselves. I quote: To Sri Satya Sai Hostel, Brindavana. My beloved teachers and boys, accept my love and blessings. In this world of change, we meet with various vicissitudes of life, both pleasant and unpleasant. We are afflicted with diseases, both mental and physical. The body is stricken with diseases and the mind filled with worries. In this state of our unhappiness, turmoil, and misery, there is only one way, and that is to take refuge in Sai. Sai alone can remove these difficulties and diseases and bring us health, peace, and prosperity. He who has got Sai's name on his lips is a Jivan Mukta, because continuous remembrance of Sai eliminates the ego sense and grants him the realization of his immortal, changeless self. Name is a link between the devotee and Sai. It brings the devotee face to face with Sai and enables him to attain the knowledge of his oneness with him, Sai. With love, your Sai, your own Sai, Sri Satya Sai. Unquote. What a wonderful letter. Brings tears to one's eyes. Although this letter was addressed back then to the Brindavan teachers and students, I'm sure it applies to each and every one of us today. To elaborate further on the essence of this letter, Sai, our only refuge, it is a pleasant coincidence, I would say, that we have amidst us an associate professor from the Brindavan campus. Without further ado, let me request the host of this online meet to unmute Dr. G.S. Sri Rangarajan so that he may share his thoughts on Sai, our sole refuge. As is customary these days, the professor has agreed to respond to a few queries we may have on this topic. I would request you to share them via the chat option enabled on this platform. Over to Sai, our only refuge.
Pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Shri Ram Kumar, Trustee, Shri Satya Sai Seva Trust, Karnataka. Shri B.R. Vasuki, Convener, Shri Satya Sai Seva Trust, Karnataka. Shri Venkat Ramana Gosavi, State President, Shri Satya Sai Seva Organization, South Karnataka. Shri Sai Chandrasekhar, District President, Shri Satya Sai Seva Organization, Bangalore South. Dr. Ashwath, Convener of Sai Gitanjali. All elders, brothers and sisters and my dear friends, Sai Ram to all of you. Permit me to share my screen. I have a few slides with me because it helps to see visuals as I speak. So kindly permit me to share my deck. So we have gathered here today, as Prajit rightly said, more than a celebration, it is an expression of gratitude on this very auspicious day, the 24th anniversary of Sai Gitanjali. And as also rightly pointed out, a building becomes a temple because of the blessings of Bhagwan and also the great seva that is carried out, the worship that is carried out by all the devotees who come to this wonderful holy place. It is so nice. In fact, on the screen I can see the altar of Sai Gitanjali, and I almost from the beginning I felt that though this is an online session, I literally felt I'm sitting there all alone in proximity to Bhagwan. So greetings to all of you on this very holy day, and I would like to share a few thoughts, and I have titled my talk Sai, our sole refuge, because under the given circumstances I thought rather than any other topic, the most relevant topic would be how do we cling on to Swami's lotus feet during this very unprecedented times that we are all experiencing on this planet Earth. So the best way would be to begin with Bhagwan's own words. So permit me to play a small video clip of Swami that actually sets the framework for my talk. And I have titled this as Never Forget God.
హెచ్చుగ సంపదలొచ్చిన గాని ఏనుగు గుర్రములెక్కిన గాని పిచ్చోడని పేరొచ్చిన గాని ప్రియముతో పెద్దలు పొగిడిన గాని దేవుని మరువకురా ఉన్నది దైవమే ఒక్కడురా దేవుని మరువకురా ఉన్నది దైవమే ఒక్కడురా.
Whatever prosperity and wealth you may get, you may have all the comforts and all the luxuries available to you. You may become mad and lose all sense, but under all circumstances, never give up God. There is only one God.
దూషించిన గాని
The wicked people may criticize you.
దుష్ట జనులు దూషించిన గాని
The wicked,
దోషరహితుడై ఉండిన గాని కష్టములెన్నో వచ్చిన గాని కాయము వ్యాధుల చిక్కిన గాని దైవము వదలకురా ఉన్నది దైవము ఒక్కడురా.
whatever problems, difficulties you may get, whatever diseases you may get, you may be free from all those things. Under any circumstances, do not forget God. There is only one God.
యోగాభ్యాసము చేసిన గాని భాగవతాదుల చూచిన గాని యోగాభ్యాసము చేసిన గాని భాగవతాదుల చూచిన గాని పండితుడని బిరుదొచ్చిన గాని పాపిష్టోడని అన్నను గాని దేవుని వదలకురా ఉన్నది దైవము ఒక్కడురా.
You may undertake practice of yoga. You may go and visit Bhagavatas and great ones. And you may be praised by everyone and you may be condemned by everyone. But under all circumstances, do not give up God. There is only one God.
నిందకు లోబడి నిలచిన గాని నిండు చదువులే చదివిన గాని నిండు కుండవయ్యుండుమురా నీవు ఎండని కుండగా నుండకురా దైవము ఒక్కడెరా ఉన్నది దైవము ఒక్కడురా.
Whatever education you may get, whatever scholarship you may get, do not become proud of it. Be always humble and recognize the truth that there is only one God and never give up your faith in God.
This sets the framework for my talk. I'm sure if Bhagwan were to be delivering a discourse today, he would have added coronavirus vachinagani, mucormycosis vachinagani, devani maruvakuda. Don't forget Bhagwan. Even in these pandemic times, the only thing that we can do is hold on to Swami. And how do we do that? Going back to the story of Ramayana, Swami narrates a very beautiful incident. It seems once Rama, when he was on the exile, Rama, Sita, Lakshmana were moving through the forest, and what actually happened was Rama's leg fell on a frog that was there below. And this is all at a worldly level. Naturally, Rama did not know, though being divine, he knows everything. And then when they moved away, he suddenly realized his foot was putting so much pressure on that frog. And so he just lifted the frog in his hands, and Lord Rama asked the frog, "Why did you not call out to me?" And Swami says, the frog gave a very nice answer. He said, "Rama, If anything else troubles me in this world, I can call out to you, O Rama. But when Rama himself is giving me this pain, whom can I call out to? I mean, this is so akin to the situation today, because we know this whole pandemic, this whole corona is all under the control of Bhagwan alone. So Swami, whom do we call out to? And Lord Rama told the frog, at such times also you must call out to me only. Even if you feel I am giving you the pain, but yet you must call out to me, because I am the only one who can save you from this pain. So this is such a great lesson for us, even amidst all this pandemic, when things seem so hopeless, when people are losing their lives, when people are suffering, still we must remember this is all happening under the umbrella of Bhagwan's blessings and grace. And therefore we should never ever forget Swami. Lord Hanuman had a very special relationship with Swami. So I have taken a very nice verse of Lord Hanuman, which Swami narrates very often in his discourse, and I'm going to make this the structure of my talk. So what did Hanuman say? So once when Lord Rama asked Hanuman, what is your relationship with me? Swami says, this is what Hanuman said. Deha buddhaya tu dasosmi, jiva buddhaya tvam amshakaha, atma buddhaya tvame vahamiti, me nishchita matihi. Let us try and understand what is the meaning of this. Line by line, there are 3 lines. And Hanuman says, I am very clear in my mind, Lord, what is my relationship with you? Deha buddhaya tu dasoham. If I think I am the body, then I am your servant. I am your instrument. The second line says, Jiva buddhaya tava amshakaha. If I think I am the mind, if I associate myself with the mind, then I am your spark. I am only your reflection. I am like your shadow. And Atma buddhaya tvamevahamiti. But honestly, if I associate myself with my true self, you and I and you are one. And Swami used to mention this many times in his discourses, that this is the way a devotee should really relate to Swami. At the body level, Swami, I am your servant. At the mind level, I am only your reflection. And at the Atmic level, where is the difference between you and me? So now I would like to take this as the structure of my talk, because at each of these levels, there is a duty, there is a responsibility, there is an obligation that every devotee of Bhagwan has to fulfill, especially during these pandemic times. So let us start with the first one. Deha buddhayatu dasoham. Swami, I cannot understand other things. I am this body, fine. Maybe I am in delusion, but as this body, I am your instrument. I am your servant. So what should I do? The answer lies in Swami himself. Shri Satya Sai. S. So what can we do? The first S is at the body level. We can do seva. So the first thing we can do at the body level is seva. What sort of seva should we do? Swami mentions very clearly, in life both are important. Manusya prayatnam and daivanugraham. You cannot sit down, we cannot sit down at our home and say, Swami will take care, Swami will take care. Many people, unfortunately, during the pandemic times do that, and they put the blame on Swami, but I think we should never do that. Swami would never ask us to ignore the rules of the land, the rules that have been laid down by the scientific world. Therefore, whatever needs to be done at a human level, we need to do. Social distancing, yes. Masking, yes. Vaccination, yes. But with all this, we must remember that all this will work only with Bhagwan's grace. So human effort and God's grace go with each other. We all know this very popular story of this cart man. You know, there was this village man who was going on a cart, and one wheel got stuck in the mud. He was a very great devotee of Hanuman. So he started praying intensely. Hanuman, please help me. You're the strongest man. Help me just lift this cart. You know, the 2 wheels are stuck in the mud, and nothing happens. And he starts, because every time Hanuman has been helping him, he is very, full of doubt. Why Hanuman is not helping me? And then, from within, this voice tells him, what are you doing? You're only praying to Hanuman. Are you putting in an effort? And then he, as you can see in the picture, he goes and lifts one wheel. Instantly Hanuman manifests himself and he says, come on, I will lift the other wheel. This is Swami's relationship with us. The more effort we put in, Swami says, I'm ready, come on, let us do this together. Therefore, Manusha Prayatnam and Daiva Anugraham both are extremely important. The other side of the story, now I narrated a story where the person was not putting in his effort and he was thinking Swami will do everything. That does not work. The other extreme is, I can do everything. Where is the need for Swami? We should not even get caught in this. Oh, vaccination alone will solve the problem. Oh, I know this doctor, I know this hospital. So even if there's an emergency, I will get a bed. That alone also will not solve the problem. Because if vaccination has to work, if medicines have to work, if corona should not infect you, for that also God's grace is required. So here's a very beautiful story. This is about Arjuna. We all know in the Swayamvara, before winning Draupadi's hand, there was a very unique challenge laid down, for the person who could win her hand. And what was that? There was a fish on a wheel, rotating wheel, right? And he was asked, you must shoot the eye of the fish. Not just that, not looking directly at the fish, but looking down in a bowl of water, looking at the reflection, you must be able to shoot the eye of the fish, which is continuously rotating. So we all know the story. Lord Krishna signals to Arjuna, come on Arjuna, you go, do it. Arjuna is very confident because after all, he was the best archer in the whole of Bharat. So he got up very confidently, and Krishna, this is again narrated by Swami, Krishna tells him, don't worry, my grace is there. And it seems Arjuna in his mind felt, Krishna, why should your grace even be required? This is like a cakewalk for me. I can just go and shoot the eye. Why do I even need your grace? And then for our benefit, Swami narrates the dialogue between them. Arjuna says, Krishna, I can do it. For these small things, why do I need your grace? Then Krishna tells him, Arjuna, you do what you are good at. I will do what I am good at. So Arjuna says, yeah, for me naturally archery is the best thing. I can shoot the eye exactly looking at it in the reflection. So what is it that I cannot do and you can do? Then Krishna smiles and tells Arjuna, you can do everything, no doubt. But what if the water in the bowl starts shaking? What if there is a breeze of air and there are ripples in the water? Then you cannot see the reflection properly. Who can still the water? I can still the water. So Krishna says, I will keep the water still. You shoot the arrow. This is how we have to work with Swami. Swami will say, I will do it. I am there with you. Now you go ahead and do your seva. It is with this sort of feeling in our mind, we should be doing all the seva that we can do today. If we are health workers, yes, at the front line, we can actually treat patients, we can help them, or we can help shifting them to the hospital. That is if we are doctors and nurses. What if we are not doctors and nurses? I'm seeing there are so many devotees coordinating the efforts of, trying to help somebody to get into a hospital, or arranging oxygen cylinders for somebody, arranging medicines for somebody. So there are so many ways in which seva can be done, not one or two or three. It is left to us. Whatever is possible, yatha shakti, but we must do seva. Our hearts have to cry out for our fellow being, because in this game we are not alone. It is Swami and all of us are fighting this challenge. Swami is with us, but we have to do seva. Paropakarartham idam shariram. Otherwise we will be left guilty. Why are we alive today? When so many people have left the planet Earth, we also could have left. But Swami has kept us here, means there is a purpose, and that purpose is service. We must serve. What happens when we serve? We attract the grace of God. Swami puts it very nicely. He says, see, my grace is always there. It's not that you have to, specially pray, Swami, please show your grace. Swami, please bestow your grace. He says, my grace is always there, but it is like the wind. It is like the wind or the breeze which is always there, but in order to capture it, you have to open the sail. And that is why I put the picture of this boat. We can see the sail is open and it is capturing the potential energy of the wind, converting it into kinetic energy, and the boat moves forward. So Swami says, to attract my grace, you must do seva. That is like opening the sail. Only when you do seva, we know Swami has given these examples many times, that when God has to rescue a devotee, when God has to come to the need of a particular devotee, as per the dharmic framework, Swami is not supposed to interfere in our life. It is a fully democratic life. You live, you do, you bear the consequences. But still Swami says, when will the dharma or the dharmic blueprint of creation allow Swami to intervene? When he sees that the devotee has done some special seva, then it attracts Swami's grace. Let me narrate to you a very nice episode which happened in Kodaikanal in the year 1994. One of the evenings, Swami was talking about grace. Very interesting. And Swami said, see, God does not interfere with nature. God does not interfere with karma. Whatever you have done actions based in this birth or previous birth, you have to face the consequences. But Swami says, when you pray to God, when you do service, you attract my grace. And how does this grace work? He gave 3 examples which I vividly remember. I've written down in my diary, and let me share with you these 3 very unique examples. Swami always gives a lot of very nice analogies. Swami said, do you know, when an operation has to be performed, the body is going to undergo a lot of trauma and pain. So what does the doctor do? The doctor calls the anesthesiologist and he gives chloroform. He gives chloroform to the patient so that the patient becomes unconscious. The whole operation gets over. The patient does not feel any pain. Swami said, even when my devotee has to go through karma, I have the power to give him chloroform. If he attracts my grace will come to him as chloroform. Even though he goes through the consequences of his karma, he will not feel the pain. He will not feel the pain. Such a beautiful analogy. So Swami said, one way in which my grace can help you is, I can make it act like chloroform so that you don't feel the pain, though you have to go through it. The second example he gives, as we can see here in the picture, every tablet has got an expiry date. So Swami said, do you know what happens after the expiry date is over? Swami said, you may take the medicine. Sometimes you're not supposed to take because it may have a lot of side reaction. But generally, after the expiry date is over, the potency is lost. So even if you take the medicine, there will be no impact of it. Bhagwan said, I can also do that. When a devotee attracts my grace, I will make him undergo the karma after the expiry date is over so that he does not feel the impact of it. The second way in which Bhagwan's grace works. And then he said, even beyond these 2, there is a third one. And he used the word Tilodayaka. I have not come across this word anywhere else. I remember only on that occasion Swami said, this is called special grace. And then he gave an example which I'm sure all of us must be very familiar with. He said, see, when a teacher is evaluating papers, which actually I'm doing now because the students have just finished their exams. He said that the teacher, suppose there is one student who is getting 39 out of 100 and 40 is the passing mark. So Swami said, what will the teacher do? Yes, as per the answers written, the student has got 39, but at that time the teacher will think, is my marking so perfect? Is my marking so accurate? Can I not give him 1 mark more? So at that time the teacher will think, what sort of student is he? Has he been very devoted to Swami? Has he been very disciplined in the hostel? Has he been practicing all the integral education items which are there in Swami's college? Okay, if he's doing all that, very sincere boy, doing lot of service, helping all his classmates, then the teacher feels, hey, what is there in 1 mark? I will give 1 mark. Swami says, this is Tilodayaka. And Bhagwan is ready to give that to all of us, but he will see what has this devotee done, what seva has the devotee done, what worship has the devotee done. Therefore, it's very important not only for ourselves, but also to benefit others that we must engage in seva. Recently, there was this was shared by one of our alumnus brothers. He was feeling very sad about the pandemic situation. He was not a health worker, not a frontline worker, so he really did not know what to do. And he was feeling very guilty. Swami, so many people are doing so much of seva, but I'm not able to do anything. I'm just sitting at home. What can I do? I believe that night Swami came in his dream. This message has been floating around, many of you may know. And Swami said, chant Rudram. Chant Rudram. In fact, many times in the mandir, in the earlier days when Bhagwan was physically present over there, he has mentioned this sentence to many of us. Chant Rudram to make your life Bhadram. Chant Rudram to make your life Bhadram. That is safe. To protect your life, chant Rudram. Not only Rudram, I mean Rudram is only symbolic, but we could chant. So if nothing else can be done in our own house, within our four walls, we can engage in some sort of worship. But still, to give a scientific bent to it, how do you think really these mantras help us? Mantras have been the best vaccinations that our ancients have given us. But only thing, they work at a vibration level. So, of late, many people have been quoting Dr. David Hawkins. Dr. David Hawkins is an American psychiatrist, and he has done a lot of research in spirituality and consciousness. Of course, his work may not be completely recognized by modern science because this is meta science, but I'm sure we will be able to appreciate what he says. He wrote a book long back called Power versus Force in 1994. And there he talks about how everything is vibration. Like Swami says, everything is energy and everything is vibrating at different frequencies. And his explanation for this whole thing is why this pandemic. He says the planet as such typically resonates at a frequency of 27.4 Hertz. Of course, these numbers are all being quoted from messages I have got. I don't have any evidence, nor do I know how he has measured this. But then he says the corona's vibrating frequency ranges from 5.5 to 25.5 Hertz. So that is why many of these very harmful viruses and germs don't affect people. But why has it affected us now? When there is negativity on the planet Earth, when there is negativity in our minds and we bring down the energy force, our frequency of vibration comes down. At such times, we have opened the doors and windows to these very dangerous microorganisms. This is his hypothesis. And therefore, he says, the only way you can actually insulate yourself, provide an immunity or a shield to yourself, apart from whatever the country asks us to do, whatever the doctors ask us to do, that is a must. At no point I'm saying we should not, we have to do that. Masking, social distancing, vaccination. But apart from that, if we chant Rudram, if we chant mantras, he says our frequency goes up as high as 150 to 300 Hertz. Far, 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 far above what the coronavirus can withstand. They will get burnt away. How else can we explain the fact that in many families, some people get it, some people don't get it, some are not so careful, still they don't get it, some get it. Yes, to a great extent, science can explain. And every day we find a changing theory coming on the television. But one thing is our own positivity, our immunity. The more positive we are, the more immunity we are able to build, we will be able to overcome these viruses. So this is one thing we can do at the bodily level. So what are the things? As a body, we can do seva. Seva is to others, no doubt, but it can also be done to one's own self. We can protect ourselves by chanting Rudram, Vishnu Sahasranamam, Vedas, whatever it is, whatever type of worship we do, it's going to make us more positive. It's going to increase our vibration level, and we are going to build a Lakshman Rekha around our own house, around our apartment. And if all of us start doing this in the world, we would have built a Lakshman Rekha for the whole planet Earth. and that day the viruses will automatically come down. So all these are the initiatives we can take up at the body level where it is about seva. Let us come to the second dimension. Jiva buddhaya tava amshakaha. Hanuman says that if I think or I associate myself with the mind, I am your reflection. So what is it we can do at the mind level? Again, going back to the same, Sri Satya Sai, the first S stands for Seva, the second S stands for Shraddha, faith. Brothers and sisters, these are the times we need to have tremendous faith in Swami, tremendous faith in Swami. Let us not say, oh Swami, coronavirus is, hit the world. Let us tell the coronavirus, do you know we have Swami with us? Swami can do anything if he wants. Yes, he can save us, he may not save us. There is a bigger law operating, but yet our duty is to have faith and hold on to the feet of Bhagwan. But now the question may arise, how do we really do this? The corona is so frightening, and the moment you switch on the TV, they give you statistics, they give you numbers, so many people affected, and so many people are going to be affected in the third wave, so many people dying, and all those scenes and all those videos and pictures they show us make our minds so negative. But that's the challenge. We have to be aware of what's going on around us, but we should not get frightened. Fear is the last thing. So how do we overcome this fear? Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan. Swami says, I am in the smallest of the small and I am in the biggest of the big. So honestly, Swami is there even in the coronavirus. In fact, in one discourse, if you recall, Swami had said, I am only Hiranyakashipu, I am only Ravana. Right? I am only Rama, I am only Ravana, I am in both of them, and all this is a whole big act going on this cosmic frame. So same way, Bhagwan is there even in the coronavirus. In that case, how do we avoid ourselves from getting frightened? How do we avoid this negative energy enveloping our minds? We can take a great lesson from our dear boy Prahalada. If you go back to the story of Prahalada, he had the same predicament. After, he had a big conversation with his father and his father got wild with him. We know the pillar broke open and Lord Narsimha came and he was in sheer terror. If you read the story and read the scriptures, it cannot be explained how that anger was, like the whole world was on the verge of getting burned, not just killing Hiranyaksha alone, Hiranyakashipu alone. The whole world was in a stage of getting burned and nothing was bringing down his anger. Goddess Lakshmi comes, everybody comes, Shiva comes, Brahma comes. They say, please cool down, please cool down. But the Lord doesn't cool down. Finally, it was the prayer of Prahalada which cooled the Lord down. And at that time, I believe, Lord Narsimha asked Prahalada, how were you able to withstand my terror? Like amidst all that, you were so calm. So Prahalada gives a very nice answer. He says, oh Lord, I never looked at your face at all because it was so terrifying. All the time, my focus was only on your feet. All the time, my focus was only on your feet, and your feet are so full of love and bliss. And that's how I remained so calm. I didn't look at your face at all. That's exactly what we have to do now, brothers and sisters. Let us not focus on all the fearful things that are happening. Let us be aware of it. But let us keep our mind very concentrated, very focused on Bhagwan's lotus feet. There is also this beautiful anecdote or an analogy that is often given in this context. When a fisherman throws a net to catch fishes, as you can see here, this is how he throws a net. Swami says, you know what happens to all the fishes? They get caught in the net. So Swami said, in one of the Chinnakathas, how do you think you can escape this net? Just go close to the feet of the fisherman, because the net is always thrown away from him, right? So if the fishes go close to the feet of the fisherman, they will never get caught in the fishing net. This is what we need to do now. Just go and cling on to Swami's lotus feet and keep praying to him morning to evening, Swami, 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 Swami. All our fear of the corona will vanish. We will be full of positive vibrations, and we will develop extreme immunity that no virus can harm us. And that will allow us to do seva for even others. Let me share one or two experiences with you in this regard. This happened way back in the 90s. Some of you may be aware. I have put a picture here to show you the sort of give you the geographical context. This was, of course, my very first birthday. In fact, this is when I was born in Swami's fold in 1990. But what I want you to see is not that. I want you to see that front part of the Mandir portico. Just beyond that is Bhagwan's interview room. And one evening when we all were seated there, right in front, I was also sitting somewhere here in front. Swami completed an interview and he came out with a couple of devotees, and there was one lady who was in a wheelchair. And obviously we saw her going in a wheelchair also. She was quite old. And this was a very common, experience, seeing devotees going inside the interview room and some of them not so well. So fine, she went in and she also came out, and Swami stood exactly where he's standing now. He was standing there and the lady with the wheelchair was there, and suddenly, to our utter amazement, Swami knocked at the knees of this lady. Swami knelt down and with his hand, he just tapped her both the knees. He said, "Utho, walk." We still did not know what was coming, and we were not totally prepared for this miracle, which very rarely you get to see right in front of your eyes. Many times it's inside the interview room. But then Swami said, "Walk." So we really could not understand what Swami is telling her. How is this lady going to walk? But then it became very obvious something very special was happening, and Swami said, "Get up, walk." And this lady, whom we later on came to know had not walked for decades because of some ailment in her legs, suddenly got up and she just started walking. Needless to say, the whole mandir was applauding, and we were also really stunned. And especially, we had a very front seat over there, so we could see and even hear Swami's conversation. So we were stunned, we were spellbound. And then, of course, the lady and the whole team of devotees went back to their places. The wheelchair was taken empty and it was taken away. After that, Swami came close to us, and Swami's face looked so calm. You can imagine, when such a big miracle has happened for us, it is a big miracle. So our eyebrows and all are raised, but Swami was so calm, his usual demeanor. And naturally, the elderly devotees who were sitting there, they said, "Swami, miracle, miracle." I cannot forget the expression on Swami's face. Swami just looked all around, at everybody. He said, "Kya miracle?" And naturally they said, "Swami, you have cured the lady. It's a big miracle. She has not been walking for..." Swami said, "No miracle." And then these are the words, and mark these words, they're very important. Swami said, "No miracle. It's her faith. It's her faith in Swami." And Swami went on to explain that her faith was so strong that when Swami said, "Get up," she said, "When Swami is telling get up, there is no question, it has to happen." And she got up and started walking. Swami explained both are important. God's grace and our intense faith in God both have to join for what we call a miracle to happen. So why I narrated this anecdote is to tell you, brothers and sisters, how faith is extremely important. And that faith has to be total. It cannot be partial. Like we cannot say, "Swami, please help me. Swami, please help me." And then you get a doubt. Will Swami help me? Will Swami help me? Swami didn't help X. Swami didn't help Y. Maybe he will not help me also. We should not have such doubts at all in our mind. The faith must be total. So how can it be total? I would like to narrate another incident from the life of a great saint called Kumarila Bhatta. You may have heard his name. Kumarila Bhatta was actually a disciple of Mandana Mishra. We all have heard the names of Mandana Mishra and Ubhaya Bharati. Many times Swami has talked about them. So this saint called, or let us say an ascetic called Kumarila Bhatta, was a great expert in Mimamsa. That is, whatever the Vedas teach, the rules, regulations, he was a great exponent of that. But during those times, the Buddhism was very dominant in India, and they were actually subduing the Vedas and Vedanta, because of which Kumarila Bhatta felt very sad. And he thought the only way to overcome them is to understand what's really happening in their ashrams. So he became a bhikshu. He took the disguise of a bhikshu and he joined one of the Buddhist ashrams. And there he was trying to understand what they teach. And now he had a total grip of how, he would be able to argue with them, saying how Vedas and Vedic principles were also very, crucial in understanding the philosophy. But needless to say, after a few days, he was caught by them and they said, "You're a traitor, how could you do this?" And therefore the punishment was to push him down a huge cliff, a big mountain. And as he was pushed down, Kumarila Bhatta cried out, "If the Vedas are true, nothing will happen to me." And he fell down, and as per his faith, nothing happened to him, but only thing, he lost one eye. And at that time he was very, disappointed. He said, "Oh God, I made this declaration, if the Vedas are true, nothing will happen to me. How come I lost an eye?" And I believe there was a celestial voice which declared, "Kumarila, you had little doubt in your mind. You said, if the Vedas are true, nothing will happen to me. Why did you say if? If you had said, the Vedas are true, nothing can happen to me, nothing would have happened. Even your eye would not have been lost." So this is a classic story, to tell us how faith should be complete and total without any doubt. Of course, the picture which you're seeing here happened towards the end. He felt so guilty that he took the disguise of a bhikshu and joined their camp. So to punish himself, he actually sat on a pyre and lit it with fire, and he was taking Jivan Samadhi. That is the time Adi Shankaracharya met him and told him not to do that. And the story continues. But the point here was to drive home the fact of total faith. Let me end this module about the mind with one on personal experience of mine, how maybe perhaps for the first time in my life, I got this experience of total faith in Swami and then praying to him and seeing a miracle happen. So this goes back to my own student days when I was doing my MBA from 90 to 92 in Prashanti Nilayam. At the end of 1 year in 1991, we all had to do a project. And it was a secondary database project, in the sense we did not require to go to a company or a business organization, but we had to collect data and then do almost a 3-month project which held many credits. My guide was Professor U.S. Rao, a very senior faculty in the Department of Management. And we picked up a very interesting problem. This problem was simulation of a job shop. You're simulating a job shop and you're trying out various scheduling rules. Scheduling is, when the jobs come into a machine shop, in what sequence they should be done. Should it be first come, first serve, or last come, first serve? There are many such rules. Now, I was simulating this whole thing on a computer using a language which was very common in those days called Fortran. So my entire project was a computer-based project, and I spent hours and hours, doing all this coding. And of course, I did a fairly good job. I was getting a lot of good results, but somehow the rules that I was testing, which intuitively both professor and myself felt would be a very good breakthrough and very good rules, they were not giving the required results on the program, and every time it was showing a bug. Okay, this is a common experience for computer programmers, so I did a lot of debugging, but days passed by, weeks passed by, and I had almost reached the last 2-3 days of the entire 3-month duration. And if only I could get this through, my project would have been completed, but I was not getting this through. So I was very disappointed. I kept praying to Swami a lot, and nothing was happening day after day. And now there was just 2 days left, and it almost meant I have to abolish this whole project and perhaps do another new project, because without this getting through, this program getting through, the whole project was meaningless. I still remember that afternoon I was sitting in the computer center at Prashanti Nilayam and staring at the screen, looking at some Fortran program like you're seeing now on the screen. And I said, "Swami, what's happening? I have put in my level best. It's not that I have not put in my effort. I have put in all my effort. And I know your grace is also there, but still, why is this not working? Because logically there seems to be nothing wrong. I have gone through every comma, every full stop, there is no bug. How do I get rid of this bug?" And at that time, perhaps Swami wanted to give me this experience, and therefore this very noble conviction came from within me, and I said, Swami, I've been reading so much. I have heard so many of your discourses, and you say, Anoraniyan, Mahato Mahiyan. If you're really there in the smallest of the small, and if you are ultimately the divine energy, you must be there, or obviously you are there even in this computer program. Because after all, what is a computer? It's all about electrical currents. It's about zeros and ones. And I said, Swami, you're there in that 0 and 1. You are the 0 and 1. Therefore, you're there in every character of this computer programming, you're there. So you alone should know where the bug is. And this conviction became so strong in me, and it almost became like an obvious thought that yes, Swami, you're there. So you alone should know where the bug is. Then why is it you're not able to debug it? So I said, come on, Swami, it's literally a challenge for you. If my conviction is true, if you are there in the smallest of the small and the biggest of the big, come on, find out the bug in my program. I'm going to run it now. And this time it has to run successfully. So I still remember this intense prayer that I made sitting there in the computer center. And I chanted Sai Gayatri, and I said, Swami, this is my conviction. Here I go. I press the enter button. And believe it or not, brothers, sisters, you know, that time the computer program went so smoothly. I got my results that day night, and all the results were as expected. And the next day I was able to even submit my project. Later on, I even, with the help of Professor Rao, I published a paper which even got a medal for that particular project because it was blessed by Bhagwan. Why I'm narrating this story to you is it was a wonderful experience for me, how total faith, like you know, everything else you have to give up. It's only Swami, only Swami. That is the time God's grace instantly works for us. So therefore, what is required at the mind level is complete Shraddha, total faith in Bhagwan. So Seva at the bodily level, Shraddha at the mental level, and what is it that is required at the Atmic level? Atma Buddhaya Tvameva Hamiti. If I am the soul, not if, I am the soul, and therefore I am only your reflection. This is a delusion. Temporarily, I think I am there in this world and I am Rangarajan and so is somebody else. But actually, we are you. Once we get over this delusion, there is no difference between you and me. So I and you are one. This is something Swami has always told us. So Shri Satya Sai, the first S stood for Seva, the second S for Shraddha. And what is this third S which is associated with the soul? Sharanagati. Total surrender, total surrender. Nothing else, Swami. It's only you who can save this world today. Doctors may do their bit, scientists may do their bit, vaccinations may be manufactured, all treatments may be given, great researchers may do research, whatever they may come up with. We ultimately know it's only you who can solve this problem. All of us should garner this sort of surrender to Swami, and we need to live in that state of surrender. Talking of surrender, the best story that comes to our mind, I'm sure you'll all agree, is Gajendra. And Swami has narrated the story so many times. I love hearing it from Swami's mouth. 2001 discourse, 2002 discourse, so many times Swami has narrated this. In fact, in the Brindavan campus auditorium, which is just adjacent to where I'm sitting, on one side is this beautiful picture of Gajendra Moksha. I think either in Brindavan or I think it's there even in Brindavan, even in Prashanti. So what is the story? Just a quick recap. Of course, there is a symbolism behind it. Gajendra is not just the elephant, but it is also the human being who is caught up in the quagmire of worldly attachments. But at a very gross level, yes, it was the elephant who was caught by this attachment called crocodile. And the elephant is, after all, strongest animal. It fights and fights, and I believe the fight goes on for years. That's why I said it is symbolic. It's symbolic of the human being who is continuously struggling amidst all these worldly attachments, pleasure, pain, difficulties, challenges, but yet we are not ready to surrender. Finally, Swami says, when the mind is totally exhausted, you're tired of the world, you're tired of the ups and downs of the world, you're tired of the ephemeral nature of the world, you're tired of the hollowness in the world, you're tired of this illusory nature of the world where there is nothing called permanent happiness or permanent peace of mind. Everything is temporary, it comes and goes. At that time, Swami says a sense of surrender comes in our mind, Sharanagati. This is what happened to that elephant. Finally it said, "Oh Vishnu, please save me." Over, story is over. Now either I die or that's it. I'm going to leave it. No more fighting from my side. And the best part of this episode comes after this. I cannot narrate the Telugu poem that Swami narrates. You must listen to it from Swami's words. It seems, but I'll give you the English translation of it. Vishnu and Lakshmi are seated on Adishesha. And Vishnu is tense, waiting. Gajendra, will you call me? Will you call me? And the moment it seems Gajendra shouted, Vishnu, Vishnu just got up and he ran. And Lakshmi was stunned. She was feeling, oh my God, what's happening? Vishnu is running. The Angavastram is falling down. He's not even worried about it. And Lakshmi runs. And Swami says, Lakshmi ran and her hairs got unfolded. And she was trying to ask Vishnu, where are you going? But Vishnu was in no mood to even give an answer. Swami narrates all this to tell us. Of course, Potana does it very beautifully in the Bhagavatam. But Swami says that is the impatience with which God is waiting to help us. But He's just waiting, will this devotee surrender to me? Will he have that state of Sharanagati? If he has, God will come running to our rescue. So we have to develop this sense of Sharanagati, which is embodied by Gajendra. And let me narrate again a very beautiful incident which happened here. This was during one of the Dashera. And there is a particular discourse, I'm sure it is available, you may have heard it. Swami was apparently very upset about things happening in the ashram. Devotees were not really focusing on Swami. And that whole discourse was what we call fireworks. Swami was very upset. He said, what is the use of staying in the ashram for so many years? If your mind is not on Swami, you may as well go out. And he was upset, apparently upset with everybody, the officials and the devotees and everybody. That evening, we all came back to the hostel. And about half an hour later, suddenly Professor Nenjundayar, who was then our controller of examinations, he came running to the hostel, I still remember. And he said, he told our warden, get all the teachers to the guest room. I want to share something very, very nice with you. He assembled all of us and he told us some marvelous things which I have noted down in my diary. But I will share with you two things. One is, after the discourse was over, as is the normal pattern, you know, the controller, the vice chancellor, the registrar would go inside with Swami to the interview room and there would be some exchange of words. So after listening to Bhagwan that day, almost thundering with so much of apparent anger, Professor Nenjundayar took the courage and told Swami, Swami, today we saw your Rudra Rupa. In fact, many of us may refer even to the coronavirus as Swami's Rudra Rupa. And Swami, in fact, he was saying, Swami's expression became so angry with him. He said, hey, do you know what Rudra Rupa is? Swami said, you don't know. He said, if I assume the Rudra Rupa, this whole cosmos will just vanish. In 1 second, this whole creation will become null and void. He said, this is not Rudra Rupa. Then what is it? Swami said, this is love of Guru. Can you imagine? Swami said, this is the love of a Guru. If the Guru does not correct you, who will correct you? He went on to say, you must be very happy if your Guru is correcting you, if Swami is correcting you because he loves you. The day he stops correcting you, finished, your life comes to an end. He has given up on you. So it should never happen. So Swami turned it around and said, the reason why I, thundered in my discourse was because of my love for all of you. And the second part which he said, which is related to surrender, and you can see the picture here, Swami holding her hand. Swami said a very beautiful thing. Swami said, see, whether you know or not, because in your illusion you do not realize it, you and I are one. Swami said, both of us are going through this experience called the world. The difference is you are lost in it, but I am only a witness. But he said, I know everything you're going through, every pain, every pleasure, every thought in your mind, every sentiment in the innermost precincts of your heart. I know what is happening with you. You don't have to pray. You don't have to tell me. I know everything. The difference is I'm a witness and you're experiencing all those things in the world. So Swami said, it is like you and me catching hands and walking on this journey. And Bhagwan said, how is it possible for me to help you? Because there is this rule of democracy. I have given you the democratic freedom. I have given you the freedom to enjoy this world. So once you have gone into it and got lost in it, I'm not supposed to help you. I can only, yes, give discourses, warn you, caution you in general, but this all is at a macro level. I can come as an avatar, right? I can give so much of spiritual message with the hope that you will listen to it and you will suddenly realize the truth and come out of this. But beyond that, I can't do unless, Swami said, unless you surrender to me and say, Swami, I am yours. Swami said, if you give me that permission, see, these are the words Swami uses. If the devotee gives me permission to take charge, then you know what? Of course, Swami didn't use these words, but I'm using the words. Swami will start doing micromanagement. Otherwise, it's only macromanagement. But if you surrender to Swami, Swami said, I'll do micromanagement. I will hold your hand. Everything in your life will be determined by me. I will be there every second by your side. But we need to give him that permission. And that giving permission concept is the concept of Sharanagati. We have to surrender to him. There is this beautiful analogy in the Upanishads of this bird sitting on a branch. But of course, I'm giving a little different version of it. It seems one day one old man was sitting in a house and it was a very stormy evening, heavy rain, so much of thunder, lightning and winds. And there was this beautiful bird sitting on a branch and the bird was so calm. And then the man saw the storm was getting more and more fierce and the branch on which the bird was sitting was cracking. He could make out it was cracking slowly, crack, crack. And he knew that within the next few seconds, the branch is going to break and this bird is going to fall down. But yet he saw the bird was very calm, very peaceful. And he was wondering to himself, what is going to happen in a few seconds from now when the branch cracks? And then as he expected, it did happen. Within a few seconds, the branch cracked. And the moment the branch cracked, the bird opened its wings and flew away. Why? Because the bird was never dependent on the branch on which it was sitting. It was always dependent on the wings. So Swami says, in the same way, don't be dependent on the world. Don't be dependent on your doctor. Don't be dependent on your worldly guru. Don't be dependent on the worship or the seva and other things you're doing. Be dependent only on the inner self, which is Swami. And then it is like the wings. Any time you can fly away. When the external surroundings become very challenging and very trembling and very difficult, you can just fly away with Bhagwan. So let's have faith in Swami, not on anything external, not even on the external Swami, but the internal Swami who is there right with us all the time. And that will lead us to true surrender. Let me close my talk with one last episode, a very popular episode. Many of you would have heard this, but yet it is so relevant that I would like to, share this particular story. That this girl was traveling in a flight, and there was also a priest who was traveling on this flight, and the flight got into sudden turbulence. And those of us who have traveled in the air, when there is too much of turbulence, it's really sort of very frightening. And you never know what happens to the plane. So, but this girl was sitting next to the window, enjoying. She was so calm. And everybody, all the passengers were panicking. And they said, oh my God. And, they were calling out the names of God. But this girl was so calm. So after the plane landed, of course, it got out of the turbulence and finally landed. The priest walked up to this little girl and said, hey, how come you were so calm? We always so shocked. We never knew what's going to happen, right? In all probability, maybe we would have crashed, but you seem to be so calm. And the girl gave a very, I don't know whoever wrote this story, wrote it so well. The girl said, no, I'm not frightened at all. Then the priest said, how come? She said, my father is the pilot of the aircraft. And so innocently she said, my father is the pilot, so he knows how to drive the plane. I'm not worried at all. Childlike innocence, but such a great, profound lesson for us. When Swami is the Srishti Karta, why are we getting frightened of the Srishti? Today the Srishti is frightening. The creation has become really full of fear, negativity because of this pandemic. But why are we forgetting the Srishti Karta, the creator? So brothers and sisters, it is time we shift our focus from the creation to the creator. We need to be in the creation. We need to be aware of what all is happening around us. We need to follow rules and regulations. We need to follow whatever science tells us. But deep inside our heart, let us not forget, above all these changing theories of science, above all these changing theories of the medical world, the one unchanging eternal truth which can never change, which was the same for Prahalada, which was the same for Dhruva, which was the same for Draupadi, which was the same for Lakshmana, is the same for us. Anyatha sharanam nasti tvameva sharanam mama tasmat karunya bhavena raksha raksha saishvara. Let us hold on to Swami. Though of course Swami may act through various instruments, the instrumentality could be a doctor, could be medicines. Maybe we may not be affected by corona itself, we may be very healthy, whatever it is, but all that is Swami's grace. So I would like to end my thoughts, whatever thoughts I've shared, with this slide which concludes my framework that we are not one but three. We can relate to our higher self in three ways. One is, if I think I'm the body, then yes, I'm his instrument. If I think I'm the mind, I'm a reflection of yours. And if I think I'm the soul, I and you are one. With the body, I do seva. In the mind, I have Shraddha. And at the level of the self, I completely surrender to Bhagwan. With these thoughts, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I thank all the administrators and the organizers of this program. I have just poured out my heart with all of you. Let's fill ourselves with positive energy, brothers and sisters. That's the only way. Amidst all this negativity, we need to stand as pillars of positive energy to such an extent that let people come to us and take the positive energy from us. Let us fill the whole planet with positive energy. The day that happens, I'm sure the pandemic will come to an end and we will be able to meet physically in Sai Gitanjali and then share, our celebrations at Swami's lotus feet. Thank you so much. Sai Ram.
As I was going through the whole talk, being silent, trying to assimilate as much as what Sir was letting us know today, I was kind of trying to also juggle around and remind people if they have any questions. And we were just thinking, we have a professor today who's speaking and an extremely well-written presentation deck. Who could have questions? But nonetheless, being customary of a program of this nature, we did get in a couple of them. I would request if Sir could quickly share some thoughts on these as well. I'm just going to read this out so that we would, for everybody's benefit. Dear Sir, mantra chanting, you said, is a vibration effect. What about the chanting that people do mentally when in a situation where no loud chanting can be done, in which there is no sound vibration? Right? For example, a silent chanting of a Veda mantram, is it okay when there is only the feeling and no sound?
Can I answer that, Prajit?
Sure, sir, sure.
Brothers and sisters, vibration, I don't know why we feel only sound is vibration. Thought is vibration. Our existence is vibration. So thoughts, the vibration begins at the thought level. Thoughts, in fact, that's what Swami says, mind is a bundle of energy. So even when we do soft chanting or soft japa within our mind, that is also potential vibration. Our saints and sages sitting in the Himalayas, apparently doing nothing but lost in samadhi, were enveloping the whole universe with their positive vibes. So the answer is very loud and clear, whether it's not only the audible sound which makes energy, thoughts also make energy. That's why Swami says good thoughts, good thoughts, good thoughts. So soft chanting is also perfectly okay.
Thank you, sir, for that very pithy answer, I would say. Quickly moving on to the next question, we have time only for two more in all. Going on to the second one, we get solace when we go to a place like Brindavan or Prasanthi Nilayam. This could be due to our feeling, but there is also the whole concept of Sthala Mahima. But what in times we are unable to go there physically. Classic example is today we have an online meet. Gitanjali is a place blessed by Swami. What if you're not able to go there? Is the bhavana alone enough? But if you try to have the bhavana and the solace still doesn't come, what is it that we are missing? Is it the Sthala Mahima or is our bhavana less?
Yeah, so the answer to this has been clearly given by Bhagwan. On numerous occasions he has told us that, see, today you're sitting in Prasanthi Nilayam, you're seeing Swami giving darshan. Maybe years later, you may be somewhere else, you may not be in Prasanthi Nilayam. And Swami would say, what is the best way to create that Sthala Mahima's power? You have to recall in your mind, close your eyes, and just you run the whole video of Swami giving darshan. Or of course, if it is Sai Gitanjali, you going to Sai Gitanjali, sitting there and praying. And ultimately, you know, the whole Mano Moolam Idam Jagat, the creation is just a manifestation of a mind. Right? How is it in the dream we create a whole universe for ourselves? So in the same way, if our thoughts are strong and if we can focus on Swami, you can make our own home a Brindavan, our own home a Prasanthi Nilayam. Swami has told repeatedly, wherever you are, take Prasanthi Nilayam with you. I'm sure you all remember that. What did he mean by saying take Prasanthi Nilayam with you? Means create that Sthala Mahima in your own home. Honestly, brothers and sisters, today that is the need of the day. Our own apartments, our own communities, societies should become a Brindavan, a Prasanthi Nilayam, emanating so much of positive energy. So as you said, why if it's not happening means maybe the intensity of our thoughts are not strong, or maybe in our mind we have given up saying, oh, it cannot happen. Sthala Mahima means we have to go only to Sai Gitanjali. I'm not at all saying that is equally important. We have to go. But in the situations like this where we can't go, we can create a Sai Gitanjali in our own minds, in our own altars, in our own homes. Very much positive.
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. I would conclude with the last question. This is something that I had in my own mind during the course of the talk. We were speaking of the three different levels of how we can pray to Swami, one at the body level, one at the mind level, in terms of having tremendous faith, and finally, ultimate surrender or Sharanagati. I was just thinking, at what level can we call it a stop? So, for example, I'm just relating back to the incident that you narrated, sir, about this lady sitting in the wheelchair for decades, right? So it's intense faith, saying that there will be a day when Swami cures, right? Or maybe will give me by feedback. How would I know when to stop? Okay, so in the lady's case, it was easy to understand because Swami came out, made her walk, and she knew, yes, now I got what I wanted. But is there a time we stop? And how would we know that what we are praying for in terms of faith? So many people today pray for good health, a home, or whatever, or wealth, or family, or whatever it is. So how do we know that we're praying for the right thing? And when do I know I should stop?
Okay. To me, I feel it's a little amusing because there is no stopping here. You will start enjoying the process of praying itself so much. We have seen this with all the devotees, right? Swami may fulfill your wish, may not fulfill your wish, or there are hundreds of ways in which he can fulfill your wish. He may do something which you least expected. So there is nothing like stopping in this. Until the final goal of becoming one with him is achieved, there is no stopping. And you will actually enjoy this whole process of, praying to him and holding on to him. He gives enough opportunities for that also, right? Therefore, let us not really make it like a business deal saying, I'm doing this for this, because then the whole spirit of love for God is lost. Honestly, when a mother loves her child, yes, the mother will have expectations that one day the son will become big and take care of her. But every time her love is not tainted with that, a business deal saying, I'm loving my son or my daughter for this purpose. When a mother's love itself is so pure, Bhagwan's love is infinite. So therefore, when we say love for God is bhakti, the bhakti should not be tainted with business dealings. That I'm praying to you for this, I'm praying to you for that. Yes, at some level, in Gita also there is arthi, arthati, jignasu, jnani, it may be there, but then all that is limited love. We must try to transcend that, because once you transcend that, there is no stop. Love is a continuous journey, there is no stop. Until the wave merges in the ocean, there is no stop. We keep going, no breaks. Everywhere else break is required, but I think as far as love for God is concerned, no break is required.
Wonderful, sir. Love for the sake of love.
Yes.
Brilliant. Just such a wonderful way to conclude your thoughts with these superb answers to these questions.
Shanti, Shanti. जय